They call themselves good. They wear gentleness like armor, speak softly, smile often, and move through the world believing they are the light that saves it. They pity the cruel, forgive the fallen, and bless the broken, and in doing so they feel holy. But what if beneath their kindness lies something far more dangerous? What if their goodness is not purity, but pride in disguise? Nietzsche once warned that the good person is often the most corrupted of all, not because they sin, but because they believe they do not. There is a strange, quiet arrogance in those who call themselves virtuous. It is the arrogance of someone who believes they have tamed the beast within. Yet the beast is never tamed. It only learns to wear a halo. Watch them closely. Their eyes betray it. That flicker of satisfaction when they are praised for their patience, that subtle pleasure in their self-control. They speak of morality, but what they seek is dominance. Not with fists, but with virtue. They do not want to conquer bodies. They want to conquer souls. Every act of mercy can be a performance. Every sacrifice can be a way to say, "Look how noble I am." Their kindness becomes a crown, their forgiveness a throne, their humility a form of control. The good person does not kill their ego, they baptize it. And this is Nietzsche's warning, that the greatest danger to truth does not come from evil men, it comes from good ones. Because evil admits what it is, evil shows its teeth. But the good hide their hunger behind the mask of righteousness. Their virtue blinds them. They no longer question their motives. They no longer hear the whispers of pride echoing through their compassion. They have turned morality into a mirror, and they cannot see that it only reflects themselves. The so-called good person wants to be loved for their virtue, not understood for their humanity. They want purity, not truth. Truth is messy. Truth admits the shadows that live inside every human heart. But purity denies it. Purity divides the world into saints and sinners, victims and monsters, good and evil, and the good always find themselves on the right side. Always. And yet, behind that moral certainty, there is fear. The fear of being exposed. The fear of losing the illusion of control. The fear that beneath the mask of virtue lies something darker, something uncontrollable, the same wildness they condemn in others. So they hide it. They bury their hunger, their envy, their lust, their cruelty. They bury it under pity, under softness, under care. But the human soul is not fooled. What is buried does not die. It grows roots. It seeps through their words, their smiles, their pity. They begin to manipulate through kindness. They start to dominate through love. Their morality becomes a web, soft, invisible, but deadly to those who fall into it. That is the hidden arrogance of the good person. They do not demand obedience. They inspire it. They do not force control. They earn it. They use shame as their weapon, pity as their leash, and guilt as their crown. And when others bow to their virtue, they call it peace. You can see it everywhere. In families, in lovers, in friends, in the righteous crowds who condemn others in the name of justice. They believe they fight for truth, but often they only fight to protect their own reflection. They speak of saving the world, but they cannot even face themselves. Nietzsche saw that behind every claim of goodness lies a will to power. Not always the power to destroy, but the power to define, to decide what is right, to decide what is moral, to decide who deserves redemption and who deserves to burn. And so the good become gods in their own minds, creating their moral universe, one judgment at a time. But what happens when the good person finally breaks? When their repressed anger finally surfaces? When the shadow they buried starts whispering, "You are not what you claim to be." They panic. They double down on virtue. They moralize harder. They preach louder. Because to question their goodness is to shatter their identity. Their morality is not a belief. It is their mask, their oxygen, their survival. And Nietzsche's voice echoes like a storm through that illusion. Beware the good and the just. They crucify those who invent their own virtue, because the good cannot tolerate the free spirit. They cannot stand the one who lives without their rules, who does not kneel before their moral gods. The good need the sinner, the lost, the disobedient. Without them, their virtue has no meaning. Their identity collapses without someone to forgive, someone to fix, someone to judge. That is the secret tragedy of the good. They build their identity on the existence of evil. Without it, they are nothing. Every act of moral certainty carries the scent of fear. When someone says, "I could never do that," what they truly mean is, "I am terrified that I could." The good person clings to virtue as a shield against their own potential for evil. They believe that if they live by rules, if they stay pure, if they follow the light, the darkness within them will stay silent. But darkness does not die when ignored. It waits. It grows stronger in the silence. It becomes a whisper that turns into a voice. And one day, that voice starts to speak through their goodness itself. They begin to use pity like a leash. They offer forgiveness, not to free others, but to remind them of their guilt. They offer help, not to empower, but to remain needed. They offer love, not unconditionally, but as a quiet transaction. I will save you, and you will adore me for it. This is not compassion. This is control disguised as care. Nietzsche saw this clearly. The morality of the good person often hides resentment, a quiet, venomous resentment toward those who dare to live freely, those who refuse to play the moral game. The good cannot stand those who act without guilt. The free soul reminds them of their own chains, and that burns them from the inside. So they moralize freedom. They call it arrogance, cruelty, selfishness. They paint independence as sin. They tell stories where obedience is noble, where sacrifice is holy, where humility is strength. But this is not love for truth. It is hatred for power. It is the revenge of the powerless. And they do not even know it. Nietzsche called this sickness slave morality. It is born from weakness pretending to be virtue. When the weak cannot rise, they call the mountain evil. When they cannot win, they invent a morality that condemns victory. They praise submission because they have no choice but to kneel. They glorify suffering because it is all they have known, and they call their chains holy. But deep inside, the truth festers. The good person begins to envy those who are unafraid. They envy the ones who speak honestly, who dare to say no, who do not ask permission to exist. They envy strength, but they cannot admit it. So they poison it. They call it toxic. They call it immoral. They say the strong have no heart, no soul, no kindness. But in truth, it is not the strong they despise. It is their own unfulfilled will. Every human being carries a will to power, a silent desire to expand, to express, to overcome. When this will is denied, it turns inward. It corrodes. It becomes guilt, self-hatred, resentment. The good person represses this fire until it burns them alive. And yet, they smile through the smoke, insisting that they are fine, that they are kind, that they are pure. But you can see it. In their trembling hands, in their need to be validated, in their hunger to be praised for being selfless. Selflessness. What a seductive illusion. There is no act without a shadow of desire. Even sacrifice seeks recognition. Even love seeks meaning. Even charity seeks to feel necessary. The good person believes they are beyond this, that they have transcended the selfishness of others. But that belief itself is the purest form of vanity. To think you have killed your ego is to let it wear your face. Nietzsche's warning was not an attack on goodness itself. It was a call to honesty. He saw that the moment we label ourselves good, we stop evolving. The moment we believe our motives are pure, We stop examining them. We become blind to our own hypocrisy. We begin to see others as problems to be solved, not mirrors to be faced. That is why the truly wise never call themselves good. They know that goodness, like power, corrupts the moment it is claimed. They know that morality can become tyranny when it loses its humility. And they know that the brightest light casts the darkest shadow. The good person, obsessed with being virtuous, forgets the rawness of being human. They forget that cruelty, pride, and desire are not diseases to cure. They are forces to understand, to channel, to integrate. To deny them is to become divided. To repress them is to become hollow. They believe they are rising above their instincts, but in truth, they are only becoming more artificial, more fragile, more disconnected from life itself. The danger of the good person is not that they do harm knowingly. It is that they do harm believing they are saving you. They will shame you for your anger, your ambition, your hunger, not because they hate you, but because they cannot bear to see what they have buried in themselves. Their love becomes a mirror they use to hide. Their forgiveness becomes a performance. Their morality becomes a prison. And the worst prisons are always the ones we build in the name of love. So Nietzsche asked, what if the truest goodness is not the denial of darkness, but the mastery of it? What if strength is more honest than virtue? What if morality is not purity, but courage, the courage to face what is real, both in the world and in oneself? The good person cannot answer that question. They will call it dangerous, because it threatens the illusion that gives their life meaning. There comes a moment when the mask begins to slip, when the smiles no longer hide the exhaustion, when the endless giving starts to feel like dying, when the good person, after years of perfection, looks in the mirror and sees not an angel, but something empty, something cold, something afraid. It is a terrible moment, the collapse of moral identity. Because once the illusion of goodness breaks, the self crumbles with it, everything they have believed about themselves. Their kindness, their patience, their virtue, turns to dust. They begin to feel the hunger they denied, the anger they buried, the resentment they disguised as love. The truth surfaces, and it is unbearable. They realize that their morality was not selflessness. It was survival. It was how they controlled the chaos inside them. They believed they were helping others, but they were only trying to silence the storm within. Every act of kindness was a way to hold themselves together. Every act of forgiveness, a way to deny their rage. Every moral judgment, a wall between them and the truth of their own nature. This is the shadow of the good, the side they never admit exists, the part that enjoys being needed, that feeds on being admired, that finds power in being the savior, the part that quietly despises those who are free, those who refuse to kneel before their virtue. They called it love, but it was control. They called it humility, but it was fear. They called it goodness, but it was pride. Nietzsche did not hate the good. He pitied them. Because to live constantly suppressing one's instincts, to constantly deny one's nature, is to live in slow decay. The soul begins to rot behind the mask of purity. The heart becomes heavy with unspoken desires, and the mind becomes addicted to moral superiority, because it is the only thing that keeps the illusion alive. But Nietzsche also offered a way out, not through repentance, but through awakening. He called it self-overcoming, the act of turning toward one's shadow instead of away from it, the courage to see one's flaws not as sins, but as sources of energy, to understand that the same fire that can destroy can also create, to stop pretending to be good, and instead to become whole. He believed that true strength is not the absence of darkness, but the ability to walk through it without being consumed. That true morality is not obedience to rules, but loyalty to truth. no matter how painful that truth may be. That to be human is not to be pure, but to be real. The good person lives in denial. The awakened person lives in balance. The good fears the animal within. The awakened learns to ride it. The good seeks approval. The awakened seeks freedom. The good lives in the eyes of others. The awakened lives in the silence of their own soul. And in that silence, something remarkable happens. The death of false virtue gives birth to authenticity. The moral mask falls away. The pity fades. The guilt dissolves. In its place rises something dangerous, something beautiful. A self that does not need to be called good, because it is no longer afraid of being bad. That is what Nietzsche meant when he said, "You must still have chaos within you to give birth to a dancing star." Only by facing one's chaos can the light become real. Only by embracing one's imperfection can love become pure. Only by walking into darkness can one ever see what light truly is. The irony is cruel. The good person who denies their darkness becomes enslaved by it, while the one who accepts it becomes free. Freedom begins the moment you stop trying to be good and start striving to be honest. Because the honest person cannot be manipulated. The honest person cannot be shamed. The honest person cannot be broken by judgment. They have already seen the worst within themselves and made peace with it. So beware the good, not because they mean harm, but because they do not know themselves. Their virtue is their blindness, their compassion, their cage, and their morality, the most seductive form of pride. In the end, the truest form of goodness is not the denial of one's shadow, but the dance with it. To live truthfully, without masks. To love without claiming purity. To help without needing recognition. To act without needing to be seen as right. That is the wisdom Nietzsche left buried in his fire, that no one is good. And that is what makes us human. To embrace that is not to fall. It is to rise beyond illusion. Because the soul that dares to face its darkness does not become evil. It becomes free. The greatest sin of the good man is his need to be good. Friedrich Nietzsche. If this made you think deeply, make sure you like this video, share it, and subscribe for more.